Hi, good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's Scrutiny Children's Services Review Group meeting. My name's Councillor Lee Bridge, and I'm the chair, and I will run through just all the preamble. So the meeting this evening will be live streamed to the public. A recording of the public part of the meeting will be available on the council website within 24 hours of the meeting. Remote participants joining using Teams, please use the hands up icon on your screen for questions and comments. Please turn your camera and microphone on when speaking and off when finished. Would members and officers please remember to switch their microphone on when speaking and off when they're finished speaking, and speak directly into the microphone. And in-person attendees, please make sure your mobile phones are switched off or placed in silent mode. With that having been said, we'll move on to the first item of the agenda, which is apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies from Katie Thompson, the representative for primary schools. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to any other apologies before I move on. I don't see any hands up. Yeah, Councillor Khan.
Councillor Yaron Begum.
Thank you. Moving on to the next item of the agenda, which is to approve the minutes of the last meeting, which are attached to the agenda pack on pages 5 to 13. Does anybody have any comments? I don't see any hands raised. Yep.
Yeah, just a question as to whether the statutory co-optees need to be having their declarations of interest recorded. It's a query I've asked a couple of times now. I couldn't see it on there for the last meeting for myself, for example.
Okay, are you okay to perhaps if you give the declaration of interest now and the minutes can be updated with that? Is that okay?
Yeah, so it will be the same as about to give in a moment, which is parent governor at Wiggle Primary School. Thank you, but it was just thank you.
Yeah. Okay. That being said, we'll move on. Actually, I didn't see any other comments, so we can consider those minutes approved. Yeah. Good. Thank you. So moving on to the next item, which is disclosure of interest. I think we can take the earlier disclosure of interest as read. Before I move on to the floor, I'll also disclose my interest, which is that I'm a local authority governor of Summaries Junior School. Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Chair. I'm the community governor for Dallow Primary School.
Councillor Mahmood Hussain.
Don't say primary.
Councillor Keynes.
Governor of Queen Elizabeth School and governor of the virtual school.
Thank you. And Councillor Fry.
A secondary school teacher at England High School.
Moving on to item 4 of the agenda, which is urgent business. Certainly nothing been raised to me.
Chair, I haven't received any notification either. Thank you.
Thank you. Under item 6, there's the chair's update. I don't have anything to update the committee on. I would just perhaps like to record my thanks to Councillor Fry, who I think covered as chair in the last meeting due to my absence. So we will move on to the agenda, the main agenda, which are the reports. The first report being under item 7, which is the childcare sufficiency. Get my teeth in. Childcare sufficiency assessment, which is on pages 14 to 40, and that is with is it Beverly House? Is Beverly online?
Yes, it's Beverly Hills and it's
Yes,
Carol
ma'am.
Wild. We're here to do it jointly.
Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you very much for your time this evening. We're bringing two reports to you. The first and most detailed is the childcare sufficiency assessment. And this is something that we have to do annually and publish. And so we're bringing it to the group for information and for your questions, and also for any other feedback that you may wish to give. The second report follows on from this, and it's really a supplementary report. It's a more detailed breakdown of the childcare uptake over the last 12 months. So within the report that you have seen attached, I will assume that people have read it, but I just wanted to highlight particular areas of it. One is that we're really pleased that the uptake of childcare has increased across Luton. So that's the 3 to 4 year old entitlement and the 2-year-old entitlement. One of the things I'm sure that the eagle-eyed amongst you will have spotted is that within the figures, it suggests that the uptake of 2-year-olds has now risen to 106%. We just wanted to clarify, because I'm sure that people would be querying that that's likely to be because the Department for Education have underestimated the size of our population. So they base their expectations on the number of children they think will take up the entitlement. But as we've seen in Luton across the whole of our school age sector, against the trend that's happening nationally of a falling population, we're seeing in Luton an increasing population. So we just wanted to highlight that to you, but to say that the underlying trend is that we are seeing more children taking up their childcare entitlement. You will probably be aware that the range of children who are entitled to childcare has expanded. So from April this year, 2-year-olds whose parents were working and met the criteria were also able to take up childcare. And from September the 1st, children from the age of 9 months have been able to take up childcare. The detailed sufficiency assessment outlines that on the basis of our analysis, there was sufficient childcare available in Luton. Sometimes parents are not always able to get the childcare provider that's just down the road, but we have to look at it holistically across the town and in neighbourhoods. And current indications are that we do have sufficient childcare. However, we are incredibly cautious because what we don't know is the level of demand that the new entitlements will bring. Particularly because the new entitlements are targeted at working families, there is a distinct possibility that many of those families already had childcare places and that they were paying for them privately. So what that could mean is that actually there's no additional demand or limited additional demand because they just switch from a paid place to a funded place. But I would suggest that the Family Information Service are on high alert and looking for any signs that there may be any pressures within any particular sectors. But at this moment in time, we don't have any significant concerns. What I don't want to do is to read all the report or highlight all of the areas. What I'd really like to do is to hand over to colleagues in the room and see whether there are any aspects of the report that you wish to explore in any detail, or any questions that you have for Beverly or myself.
Councillor Mahmood Hussain.
Yeah, can I ask you, in terms of the estimate of number of children that you said that they nationally they have underestimated it, does that have any impact on funding for those children, or will they all get the same funding for each child?
So the way that the funding works for early years, and Beverly can add or correct any mistakes I make on this, but the way that the funding works is we get an allocation of funding and then we distribute that funding, and then the numbers are monitored through a termly headcount process. And if the headcount process identifies that we have more children than we initially expected, then there is a correction made to the funding formula, which then will give us the additional funding that we should have had in the first place.
Thank you. Yep.
So thank you. Thanks for the report. It's really clear. And I wasn't sure whether this question is going to be applicable to this section or the next one. But in my experience, I've noticed that there are some providers that whilst the availability of 3 to 4 year olds entitlement is 30 hours, some providers aren't necessarily providing the full 30 hours. Is that something that you're aware of, and is it a big problem in Luton? And is that necessarily a barrier then to some families, whether working or otherwise, to be able to access that? Sorry, I promise it's not a loaded question. It was just it's one I experienced firsthand. So I just wanted to know if there was anything been done about it, although that was a few years ago. Thank you.
Thanks, a good question, and I suspect Beverly might have a
Do you
very
want me
good
to
answer
take that
for you. Thank you.
Well, I'm not sure a very good answer, but yes, we are aware that obviously some of our private and voluntary and independent providers, they are private businesses, so they are able to dictate but choose the actual offers and how they offer the hours and, you know, what they do offer from there. So we are aware that sometimes a parent might approach a provider and they're not offered the actual hours or the package of hours that they want from there. What we would like to think is that's where the Family Information Service comes in that if, you know, parents are struggling to find or can't find what they think they should be able to find, then we should be able to point them in the right direction, even if that means sometimes these hours are shared between 2 providers, maybe a nursery, preschool and a childminder. So I would say on one hand, yes, we are aware that some of our providers sort of are offering hours in sort of more of a set fashion, but I think a lot of them have to do that from a business case as well, from the finances of the business of, you know, the hours that they offer. But we would always encourage parents to contact the Family Information Service, and, you know, hopefully we'll be able to sort of find, you know, another provider or some sort of compromise where there's 2 providers sharing those hours.
Sorry, so just to follow on from that then, which is how would parents know that you're there to support them? Is there a communications package that they get, for example, once the children hit a certain age, for example? Do they know that they can reach you? Or I'm just trying to think of the effective ways in which they know they're feeling they can be supported. Thanks.
The Family Information Service is on our council website, so we're assuming hopefully people may know that. We do also have a Facebook site and social media presence. We share a lot of our information through all the Flying Start websites and social media as well. So hopefully we're getting our sort of the service, you know, information out to the younger families before they actually get to the preschool age. So and then we try and do sort of, you know, work in the picnic in the park, and we share sort of, you know, all our obviously flyers, information. We've had banners, which I don't know whether you've noticed, we haven't had any recently because the extended entitlements have changed so much. We need to get back on board. But in the past, we've had banners in places, you know, public parks and on sort of, you know, railings where and areas where we think we are going to sort of get that message across to young families. So I hope the message is there for the Family Information Service. We definitely, you know, try and share that.
And if I may add to that, also through our family hubs. So what we've also spent a lot of time doing is working with other professionals, so health visitors, for example, so that other professionals are aware of the entitlements. But one of the things I wanted to just respond to is your comment about the 30 hours as well, because as Beverly said, one of the challenges for providers is if parents want flexible provision, which they are entitled to request, sometimes for providers that can be really difficult to manage. So if everybody wants Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but nobody wants Thursday, Fridays, or, you know, everyone wants mornings and not the afternoons, it can be really challenging. And I know some of our providers and schools, maintained nursery schools included, have had a real challenge in terms of how can they best offer flexibility whilst trying to meet the needs of the families, but also trying to meet the needs of the children. There's no easy answer, and we're really aware that what we can expect for providers is to do their best to meet the needs.
Thank you. Any other questions, Councillor Keynes? Yep.
On page 21 of your report, Luton Council has been allocated £458,000. Is this money we've got, or is it money that's in the pipeline?
It's money that we are the custodians of temporarily, with the expectation that we passport it to schools and external providers for the delivery of the wraparound provision. So it's not our money, and we are being incredibly closely monitored to ensure that we pass that through to those providers of the wraparound provision. And just before the meeting started, we received an email to say that we are one of 20 local authorities who have been selected to be part of the evaluation programme and the closer monitoring of this. So yes, that money unfortunately doesn't add to the council's budget.
I'm not sure whether that was a yes or a no.
So we've got it, but we've got to get it out we've got to get it out, and we've got to get it out before the 31st of March.
Right, okay, thank you.
Councillor Hussain, I see you raise your hand, or yeah.
Can we sort of, or do you want to take that later on in the funding for SEND, particularly in short breaks, as well as the funding as a whole, because we had a huge increase in the special needs, and Luton is exceptional in most of the other local authorities. So do you want to cover it now, or do you want to say something?
I think it makes sense to bring all the questions together, because the second report, which goes into more detail around numbers, it's all connected. So it makes sense to look at all of this in the round. When you're saying about short breaks, though, Councillor Hussain, I'm afraid that doesn't sit within the remit of the budget that we are responsible for, and it doesn't sit within the remit of this element. So I'm afraid I'm not able to answer that specific question around short breaks. Was there a question specifically around SEND and early years? I mean, I think obviously you've seen that we've seen an increase in the number of children under 5, particularly with additional needs. And what we have seen is that the number of children who have been approved for resource nursery places, for example, has continued to increase above the number of places that we actually have funded. What we have done in response to that is provided some additional funding for individual children through the Education, Health and Care Plan process. So it's not that the gap between the number of children approved and the number of spaces available means that children aren't getting provision. We're just having to fund the difference in a different way. But that is having a significant impact on the early years block within the designated schools grant.
Chair, reason I was asking you in terms of the primary school, where the schools have taken on responsibility for having extra places for the people with special needs. I mean, I'm talking from experience from a school that I'm involved with, is there is a serious concerns in terms of the funding, that if they don't get it, then they will not be continued to provide, and take on those children that they've got. So that's what I'm talking about, is that there is a serious concern that there isn't sufficient resources given to those schools that have voluntarily agreed to have special needs children.
Yeah, absolutely. And that sort of does sit beyond the remit of this element, because we're just looking at the early years block. But I am aware, you are absolutely right, there is a significant pressure on our high needs block within the DSG. And it's not something that's unique to Luton. It's a national issue that has been recognised. I can't give you any specifics on the figures and the solutions to that, other than to acknowledge that you are right.
Do you want to come in on that? Yeah.
Thank you very much. Just to pick up on that, schools get a notional SEND budget as part of their budget allocation. So a proportion of the money that they get is meant for children with special educational needs who have not yet received an EHCP, an Education, Health and Care Plan. So they do have funding for what we call SEND support, those who are actually at the early stages of identification where they may need some additional support. So that's already within schools. Within the high needs block, which is what we use to fund children with special educational needs, there are various layers in terms of how much money we give to make sure that the needs within the EHCP are fully met. and therefore some are more complex than others, so they get more funding for those needs. But that is based around the needs that are identified in the EHCP. What we also do is actually have additional resource provisions for children with complex needs attached to our mainstream schools, and they're funded separately in additional to their core pupil funding. And what we are doing as part of the Education and Learning Reset Plan, which will be coming to scrutiny later on this term, we have key strategies around social, emotional, mental health, and also alternative provision and early intervention, where we've identified an amount of funding from the Heinies block to go as early intervention to try and reduce the need for children to go through for an EHCP. So what we try to do is to balance that funding. Much of it goes to our statutory work for those who are actually got an EHCP, but we're trying to rebalance to make sure that schools have sufficient for early intervention, including language support, speech and language, autism, and our inclusive team working with them.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? No. Okay. So I think it was just a case of noting the report. So thank you for giving the report. And I think we can perhaps move swiftly on to the next item, which is, I think, also being covered by you, which is the item 8, the early education funding entitlement take up, which is on pages 41 to 46 of the agenda pack. Thank you.
Thank you. So
Thanks.
The main headlines have been summarised in the previous report, because what we do is we extract the main notes for publication, but what we wanted to do was to provide a more detailed breakdown for councillors and officers, because we've been asked in the past for additional information. So this is really just to provide that deeper dive of information. As you can say, I did mention some of the figures earlier. I said about the 106.5, sorry, that's the 3 to 4 year olds, not the 2 year olds. But what you can see is that we have had an increase in the uptake of 3 and 4 year olds and of 2 year olds. Going back to the 30 hours, we've got 4% more families actually being funded for that. The other thing that we have that I did want to flag, actually, and this is thinking more about our more vulnerable children, is that there is an element that's available for early years pupil premium that is for our children who are disadvantaged. And what we're seeing is the number of children who are eligible for that has decreased year on year, and you'll see that that is something that is an issue for us. The reason for that is that the eligibility, the threshold for families to reach in order to be eligible hasn't moved. So with inflation and small increases in household income, the threshold has not moved. So that means that more and more children are just in families that are tipping over the threshold for eligibility, which means that we don't have as much early years pupil premium funding coming in, and therefore is not as much going out. But what we are confident about is that the processes to identify those children who are eligible are much stronger than they were. So we are at least now really confident that those who are eligible are getting that funding. We have outlined as well the new working entitlements, which I mentioned earlier. And so really it's just whether or not there are any questions from the additional information. We can see, compared to our statistical neighbours, our take-up is pretty strong, so that we know that there's no particular issues linked to our demographic that are concerning us, and we think we're doing really well. But we will continue to try to identify those families who don't take up the offer, and to look at ways in which we can work with them through our Flying Start and family hubs, because one of our big challenges is about improving outcomes in early years, and we can only improve outcomes if we can have contact with those families.
Thank you. And I mean, just in relation to the pupil premium funding, as I understand, it's up to each individual school how they spend that pupil premium funding. Do do you as a department, are you able to give guidance or pointers as to, in your experience or experience of other schools, where that money is best spent?
Yes, so bearing in mind with the early years pupil premium that a large proportion of this is going to our PVI providers, and a much smaller proportion is going to schools. When we work with schools, we have regular conversations about pupil premium children, looking at the outcomes of our pupil premium children and how funding is spent. And similar conversations have happened with our private and voluntary providers, although they have smaller numbers. I think one of the things that's really important, and I don't want to steal the thunder of my colleague who will come to a future meeting around outcomes, but one of the things that we're seeing is that our outcomes for disadvantaged children in Luton are relatively strong, particularly when compared with the outcomes for children nationally. So that gives us some confidence that in Luton, the funding that we have to support our most vulnerable children is actually being used quite effectively and making a positive difference, although we still want more. We always will want more, but we do offer guidance around what you can do with pupil premium, what you ought to be doing with pupil premium, but we expect providers to look at what difference is this making for the child.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the floor? Councillor Hussain?
I ask you, did you say that there has been a reduction in pupil premiums?
There's a reduction in the number of children who are eligible for it. Yeah. So that's because of the threshold. The threshold stayed the same, but as inflation and income has gone up, then there are more families who just tip over that threshold.
Yeah, but I'm a bit surprised because, in terms of child poverty, it's increased by a huge amount, and people not claiming, the free school meals. Is very surprised that they're not doing that, because the two should really work together, don't they?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's strange that they've not kind of either index linked it or linked it to inflation in any way. And obviously we're talking about the qualification criteria. Have the amount of money per qualifying child, has that remained much the same, or has that increased or decreased?
Want me to do that one, Carol? It's gone up a few pence each year. It goes up, and early years pupil premium is paid based on the sort of the 15 hours that universal that children receive. What they have done is extended the early years pupil premium to the younger children as well, that are receiving early entitlements, but then you have to also balance that these additional children receiving early years entitlements are from working families, so they are unlikely, some possibly might qualify on that lower threshold. Just to give you an example, to qualify for early years pupil premium, a family needs to have an income of, I believe, less than, I think, 7,400 on universal credit. That doesn't include any benefits, but that's any additional income they've got. And that's the threshold that hasn't changed. It's very similar to the 2-year funding that is higher than that. But what we're seeing is our list of children that perhaps are eligible for that disadvantaged funding is just reducing all the time, because the threshold is staying at the same level. And every time we get a list, it's slightly lower number of children that might be eligible. And I think that's what's happening with the EYPP. So yes, they have moved it up, but I mean, we are talking sort of pence per hours, a couple of pence each financial year, but that threshold just isn't moving.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the floor? No. So again, on this item as well, the recommendation is just to note the contents of the report. So again, thank you for running through the report and answering our questions. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Bye-bye.
Thank
you. So the next item on the agenda is item 9, which is the Children's Services Improvement Plan. And that was in one of the follow-on documents that was sent out. and that's with in the hands of Paul, who's on the screen now. Paul.
Good evening, members. Apologies for not being in person. I will endeavour to make sure that I am normally with you. So this report is to provide you with the regular bi-monthly update on the improvement activity we've been undertaking within children's social care, and to provide an update to the outcome of the Ofsted focused visit that commenced on the 22nd of July with 2 inspectors and ended on the 1st of August. So I'll start just with an overview of the improvement activity. Busy summer, lots of leave and lots of people in and out. So I don't think it's as busy as normal, but it's certainly we have activity has been continuing at pace, as you would imagine. So in theme 1, improving quality, we've seen additional recruitment of 8 ASYEs in cohort 1 coming through, and we've got further recruitment taking place. And we've got 4 new student social workers, and we've linked them into our family safeguarding team 3, and that's come in through the frontline programme, which again is really good. We're developing our systemic leadership training, and we've a very esteemed colleague, Dr. Barbara Mackay, has been providing we had the first session last week, which was absolutely fantastic, but there's sessions with team managers, DTMs, as well as heads of service. So again, really trying to build on our leadership skills and training. Our practice framework has been consulted on with staff, and amendments have been made. And this is about to be signed. Well, it's about to be presented and signed off by DMT. Theme 2, so improving our implementation of learning. We've had an options appraisal. We've been developing a new options appraisal for the direction of our child-friendly Luton. And we're looking at 2 things about rights respecting schools, as well as the UNICEF programme for child-friendly cities and communities, and weighing up what gives us the best value. Our annual takeover day plan has been co-produced and is to be presented to SMT shortly, and then we'll go on to DMT. We've our engagement strategy, which was created by our All in It Together group, has been signed off now, which is fantastic. We've had Essex complete some diagnostic work with our Edge of Care team, and we're awaiting that final report. And then we've had some solution-focused training being delivered by Essex for 3 cohorts for social work and management. Theme 3, so improving tools. Quite positive. So our LCS and ICE improvement activity is being reviewed following the transfer of some of the Liquid Logic team that now fall under our system lead remit. So that's really quite good for us and really positive. And our system lead has been instrumental in the development of some of our Families First activity that I'll come on to later. And we've got a forward plan, and we're looking at how we grow that team with within the ICT or the new DDAT team. All portals are now live within LCS, and we're continuing to review these. And actually, again, we've used that portal model within our single assessment as part of our Families First work as well. So it's again really kind of moving at pace with some of that data systems activity. We are reviewing our TRIEX policies and procedures across the whole of children's services, and our fostering handbook is being updated. And we've also reviewed our PAM, used to be PAM, they're now PAT, performance and accountability meetings with team managers. And they're now working well on a monthly basis with team managers presenting. Theme 4, so improving our strategic partnerships. So performance data is being reviewed to ensure it's used consistently and that we're only using particular sources of data. So it's not what other people are recording, we're only using our chat tool and our scorecards, and they have to come from BI. And we've just been going through that as a department to make sure that we've got that surety of data. We've identified additional posts within our care leaver team, and recruitment is underway, or the need for additional posts for our care leaver team and recruitment is underway. Our foster carers are now, it's been agreed by executive that they can receive council tax support, which is fantastic. And our corporate parenting board invites have been shared with all corporate directors and service directors to bring the corporate parents really into that frame. Partnership working, again, I'll talk about the family first, but really we've had some absolutely fantastic response from our key partners, from our health colleagues, our education colleagues, and from our police colleagues about how we develop the multi-agency child protection team. And then we're looking at how do we strengthen our family help offer with a multi-agency, with multi-agency teams from partners coming in to work in that space with us. So I'm going to pause there to take any questions on the improvement plan and our activity for 1st of July and August before I go on to the focused visit update, if that's okay, Chair.
Certainly. I've got a question linked to this, but it's also linked to the Ofsted, so I'll hold my question until a bit later. Any other councillor today?
Can you, in terms of the report, look on the the focus visit by the Ofsted on pages 7, 8, and 9, and number of issues: A, the caseload; B, the PAs, and the report is in terms of, I mean, how long this has gone on, and is that from since the last focus visit, or has there been any improvements? Because the caseloads and that also is an issue. Also, in terms of the housing, if a young person, care leaver, I've put in too many questions to you, but if you can answer that one by one. If care leaders in priority 3, he's got no chance of getting a house or any accommodation, a flat or anything like that. So that was once a protocol between housing and that the care leavers were given a priority. Is something is changed? And if it has changed, what is the reasoning behind it?
Thank you, Councillor. I hadn't moved on to the care leavers part of my report, but if there's no further questions on the improvement plan, happy to come back to you on that and just run through that report.
I think we might have a question on the improvement plan, and then we'll move back to that. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for the update, Paul. It was good to see the progress since the November update that we received as a group. But I'm a bit eagle-eyed and looking at the November update, I think that we received on the improvement plan this is. So back then, I think you introduced theme 5 as the new theme that you were telling us about. So it's good to see the progress in that. But the one that sticks out for me is the review underway. So this is theme 3, which I think you've highlighted already. So at that point, we were told that there was going to be a review underway of the resources within LCS and EYES. And I'm going to get the acronyms wrong.
It's fine.
I'm not suggesting that there hasn't been any progress in this area, but I'd love to know a little bit more about this and what the barriers are, and then maybe if this is it a priority area, and if so, what can we do to move the dial on this? Thanks.
So I can answer that. One of the critical barriers was resourcing. We now have additional resources that we're able to bring to bear thanks to the Family First programme, but also with the advent of Civica coming in, there's a bit more flexibility in what we can ask them, those staff now that they are actually Luton staff, to do. So there is progress that they'll now come into the DDAT team and into Steve himself, who can then move that forward. There's also a real challenge in finding those professionals with that level of skill for what we need, and that has proved. I've been working with Steve to try and get a system lead for Liquid Logic in that doesn't want to charge us the earth for their time. So that is it is an issue, and our way of trying to deal with it is to try and upskill our own staff to be able to get them to do that work. but I agree, it's not been ideal, but we feel like we've moved much further forward with it.
Yeah, and it's really good progress, so please don't take it as a criticism. It's just good to know some of the detail. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on that first part before we move on to the Ofsted report? Nope. Paul, if you'd like to carry on then. Thank you.
Yes, so thank you, Chair. So Ofsted came in to particularly look at our care leaver offer. They were looking at preparation and support into adulthood, our keeping in touch with our care leavers, our care leaver local offer. So what is available to our care leavers, and are they able to see it all online? Support for our former separated migrant children, and support for care leavers in custody and or leaving custody. So what they noted was they found skilled and enthusiastic personal advisors and frontline managers committed to meeting the needs of our care leavers. They could see that we had, as leaders, we have identified the challenges, and these are linked to overall increases in our care leaver numbers, and these have increased considerably over the last year. And we have been taking action to address capacity, but again, the market to hire and get PAs in is a challenging market. So we have had some solutions, and we've upskilled again. We've gone into our own staff teams to try and upskill existing staff to become personal advisors, and we've actually had 2 of our family support workers move over with support and training to become personal advisors. So we're making inroads, and we're finding ways to address the recruitment challenges we face, but we do face some recruitment challenges. Care leavers have definitely spoke powerfully about the positive impact that they have for their PAs, supporting them into employment, where possible, their own homes, supporting them with getting a settled status, and just always being available to them. And that was really it was a clear message that we picked up. They said that most PAs were very curious about their care leavers' well-beings and safety, in ensuring that their rights and entitlements, that they were aware of their rights and entitlements. So things for us that Ofsted identified that we could improve upon. Absolutely, personal advisor capacity. We had that from personal advisors and from care leavers that we want to see caseloads come down. We know that higher caseloads do not mean it means we're not able to deliver the level of quality of support that we really want. So we are working incredibly hard with our care leaving team to try and increase its capacity and size. And I believe there's an additional 2 personal advisors being recruited on top of the 2 that we started recruitment for in March. So which would bring our care leaver, our PAs, to 17 in number. We need to improve our care leavers our support for care leavers who are in custody and leaving custody. And that's just about making sure that the right plans are in place, but also making sure that we're being informed in a timely manner by our probation colleagues about people leaving custody. Because we did have a couple of occasions where we were told on the day before, which is very difficult to get a plan in place for that young person. As the councillor mentioned, you're absolutely right. The care leavers having access to suitable accommodation, particularly within the council, and when the council are offering 30 care leavers additional points to get housing between the ages of 18 and 21, and actually that doesn't necessarily then reflect into housing. So we are looking at what do we do, and we're working with housing to strengthen the protocol, and we've already made and set up discussions with Claire and her team to take that forward. And then the clarity and comprehensiveness in the delivery of the local offer, that was very much around, it didn't have sort of reach deck attached to it. So there wasn't an easy way for translation services within it. And we're looking at, with the digital team, how do we address that, and how do we strengthen particularly our separated migrant, our former separated migrant children are able then to access all of the the quite wide offer that is available within Luton. So we also had feedback where there's additional areas we can strengthen. So we want to look at, and we will be looking at young people close to the service. We want to strengthen our pathway plans. We're looking at our performance data as well and making sure we're using the right data sets to track progress of education, employment and training. And then we're looking at opportunities to co-produce and involve our young people in the strategic development of our department, our council and our offer. So through all of that, we've developed a detailed action plan. We've addressed some of the areas, as you would imagine, very quickly from within the service, but we recognise that some of the actions require more detailed planning and support. And so we are transferring those to the improvement plan, which we will share at the next scrutiny with those detailed in. And this is all against the backdrop that we're very aware that next year we are due a full ILACS inspection and a SEND area inspection as well. So a timely reminder, improvement activity continues, and we're working hard to ensure that we're ready.
Thank you. So if we move on to questions, before I call in Councillor Carl, just see Councillor Mahmood Hussain, you asked some questions preceding this presentation. Has the presentation covered all of your questions?
It would be, I'll ask after my colleague has asked the question.
Okay, so I'll call Councillor Carl in then.
Thank you. I'd like to start off by giving the Children's Services team a massive well done for all the hard work you've done up until now. And I know an Ofsted inspection can be very daunting, and I know the team works extremely hard. I think the feedback that we've received is, I wouldn't say it's surprising, because actually there's a national housing crisis, and I wouldn't say it's unique to Luton. And I think I feel it was probably a little bit unfair to place the blame on Children's Services when actually we need to look at the housing situation holistically. I don't think it is necessarily, the onus necessarily doesn't solely lie on Children's Services to be able to provide homes for care leavers. So I do think that was a little bit unfair for them to, kind of get that out of the conclusion. In terms of the improvement plan, I'm really pleased to hear that you've got some positive things within the improvement plan. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I think it's important that we keep our morale up and, follow that improvement plan so that when we are due for inspection next year, that we're ready and that we are on the way to improving. Thank you. And again, massive well done to everyone in the team.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Now,
I mean, we all recognise that everybody's working hard, but I think the inspectors don't look at it that way, and it is very unfortunate that if it is these things, they don't ask for resources. Whether you have got the money, they're not interested in that. They're only interested in the improvement. And that's why we're the critical friends of the Children's Services, and we need to be very frank and honest about it, because the inspection, the full inspection, is very thorough. Somebody who's seen a number of them, God, I tell you, they are not, when you got about 7 or 8 people coming to you and I've had more than that in that, and that is very much nerve-wracking for the staff, and one needs to appreciate that. My concern is that these protocols did exist in terms of, and even in the new build, we put a number of units that will be for the care leavers, and that was between the housing as well as the Children's Services. So we need to be, implementing those that we already agreed. And I think we need to be, as much as everybody's working so hard, we need to do that, because the inspectors would be looking at that, is what are you doing in terms of the best interest of the care leavers? And, no matter what we try to do it, they'll be talking to the young people as well, and to get their opinion, the child's voice. And that's where I think we need to be learning from our previous experiences and trying to get more, this time we are out to be good. I think, Dheeraj, don't you? I mean, we're going for good now. We are on our way. We should be going for the good and looking, upwards. Outstanding, I hope, in some years to come.
Thank you. I don't think there's a question there. It's more of a statement. Yeah. Thank you. So I won't call Pauline. Councillor Fry.
Thank you. Just moving forward and thinking about how you'll address Ofsted moving forward, have you thought about getting in an expert that could maybe do a deep dive of the areas to help you move forward and improve, so that when Ofsted come in, you're already meeting certain criteria?
Councillor, thank you. Yes, we have a sector-led improvement partner in Essex who come in and support us with doing deep dives on quite a regular basis, and they've just recently been in to look at the Edge of Care team. We also have a really, really good QA function, and we're working really hard to make sure we are ready to get to good.
That's great. Thank you. It's good to hear. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Begum, and then I'll call Councillor Khan in.
Hiya. My question is more around the PAs. So in terms of the PAs that we have, it's a bit disheartening to hear that some PAs take the time to get to know their people, their clients that they're working with. And sometimes they struggle to be able to meet them on a regular basis. What assurances or what do you have in the plan? I mean, I've looked through your plan, but how likelihood are you to meet some of these targets and reach the full potential? And do you have standards, like standard practices, where you would kind of sort of go through what's happening, what is working, what's not working, and what can be improved? Although I know you've had Essex Council come in, do your deep dives, but is there anything more that can be done?
Councillor, for the PAs, it really is about capacity. It's certainly not about their desire, and what we need to do is get more personal advisors in. We have had quite an increase in young people moving from children in care, becoming care leavers, and we've not had the resourcing available to us as a department to then increase the number of PAs concurrently with that. And then when we have got the resourcing, PAs have not been easy for us to come by. Recruitment is a challenge unless we want to go through agency routes, which are not stable. So that's one of the challenges that we have. So that's what we're trying to work through. We absolutely have practice standards that our PAs are expected to work to, and they are reviewed through their management oversight with the team manager and the two deputies within the care leaver team.
Thank you.
Councillor Khan?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm not sure, you might already have this in place, but is there a system where there's sort of like an insight group set up of care leavers, or kind of like a focus group? It's something that my colleague Mahmood Hussain referred to earlier on. Is there like a focus group, or is there a group like an insight group that potentially could meet and give feedback on the improvement plan as well? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. We have a group that meets on a monthly basis called the Chillin' Thursday group, and they meet and then they cook food together and then they chat. We want to strengthen that. We've got lots of fantastic young people who are really motivated and really want to get involved and help us. So we are looking at, one of the things we want to look at is how do we use that enthusiasm to make things better. And they came to us and said, we actually want to mentor other care leavers who, those young people who are just becoming care leavers. So we've had that offer, and now we're looking at how do we explore that, strengthen that, support them with training and development to move that forwards. But yes, it's absolutely one of the things we really want to do, because Chillin' Thursday should also be a bit of more informal and fun, because it shouldn't always be about, we bring our care leavers together and then we ask them lots of questions about how the council operates and what they do and how can we make it better. So we want to have a dual ask of them. So we want to be able to create that place for them to fun and socialise, but also we want to develop a core team who are really interested and motivated to get involved with us and share their knowledge and experience. So absolutely on the plan.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. I know that the National Children's Bureau they've done a lot of research with the Cambridge University around care leavers, and were actually one of the main players for Josh McAllister's review around social care. So I actually used to work for the National Children's Bureau, and I'm still I kind of worked on the policy a little bit. So if you are happy, I'm happy to plug you in with them and maybe get some discussions in with them as well, if that's helpful at all.
I would very much appreciate that, Councillor. So yes, please.
Thank you. Just coming back to the PA recruitment. So I think you mentioned that there are currently, was it a few open positions? Is it
There's two open at the moment, Councillor.
So once we're up to, so we say full head count, would that be sufficient to meet the requirements as mentioned by Ofsted, or is it a matter that actually even at full head count there might still be a problem with the case workload?
I would expect it to bring the number of care leavers being supported by a PA down to below 25. Which would make their workload much more manageable. But ideally, we would bring our caseloads down further.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Yurosh, yep.
I think just to give Scrutiny Group a bit of context, in June 2023, the total number of care leavers open in Luton Borough Council ranged around the 270 mark, and that number rose to almost 360, so almost 100 at the point of Ofsted's visit. And that's an average caseload for 4 personal advisors. What we have is a budget that's stretched to the max, with as many staff as we possibly can to manage the entirety of the cohort of children being supported. As a result of us starting to see in February of this direction of travel, and the other thing just to bear in mind is that we haven't had projection planning. That's something that we've only started to introduce and do at the end of last year. And that projection planning started to give us a really clear sense that actually by this time next year, the numbers will go up to 380, because the numbers of children turning 25 or care leavers turning 25 is smaller than the number of young people turning 18. So we are going to see a further increase in numbers of care leavers at that transition point from 17 to 18. With that in mind, we agreed on a number of personal advisors to be recruited to. And actually, as Paul has highlighted, we've had some struggles with recruitment. Had we had all personal advisors in post at the point of Ofsted's visit, our overall number of allocations or average caseload would have been within the target measure that we had set for ourselves. So it would have been green, as it were, within our performance indicators. That wasn't the case because we couldn't recruit in time. And actually what our personal advisors have fed back to us is that as a result of that, that's affected them being able to meet some of those minimum standards of practice that we've set. So we've taken that overarching strategic view to say, this is something we need to fix together. There's no blame here. This is about learning and doing better next time.
Thanks, George. So just off the back of that, so if we're projecting that it's going to be a significant increase, then what's the strategy in terms of obviously not only getting up to headcount for the current care leavers, but actually to meet future demands? And I guess how would the funding for that be calculated? Can we get increased funding per leaver, or is it a fixed amount that we just stuck with?
I mean, suffice to say, we've got a set budget to be able to operate within, but my responsibility is to flag up where that set budget needs to be stretched further. We're very aware that the council's operating in a tight financial climate at the moment, so we utilise all grants opportunities available to us. So we have grants from the Home Office provides grants around the unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, or we call them separated migrant children. And we've also been looking at how we think about the long-term planning for children's services. So the Families First for Children Pathfinder programme is aimed to reduce numbers of children coming into care. The aim of this programme is to successfully keep children safely with their families. So actually in the longer term, we should see lesser children going on child protection plans, lesser children coming into care, and as a result, lesser children then requiring leaving care services. Our current planning suggests that if we get all our personal advisor capacity filled, we will be within the allocated caseload limits. What we need to do for the end of next financial year is to do a bit more of a review of our workforce across the board. And that's a piece of work that's underway at the moment.
Councillor Hussain?
Can I ask you, Dheeraj, in terms of by the time the full inspection comes along, all this, the focus visit has given us early enough warning. Are we likely to be able to make sufficient progress to be able to satisfy when they do the full inspection?
I mean, I think the reality is Luton Children's Services is on an improvement journey. At the last point of the last inspection, it was deemed to requiring improvement to be good. When Ofsted approached us about undertaking this focus visit, bearing in mind that care leaver judgment is a new judgment introduced by Ofsted, previously it was seen in the wider cohort of children in care, we felt this would be a really good touch point for us to get a sense check of our improvement journey, and that's exactly what we got from it. I believe we have a fantastic team in Luton, absolutely committed to getting us to that point. I will always say our aim is to provide exceptional services to our children and young people. Ofsted judgment will come alongside that.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Good luck. Excellent. Okay, so again, I think just looking back, I think we were just noting the content report. So thank you, Paul. Thank you, Dheeraj. And we will move on to the next item of the agenda, which is item 10. That's Wave 2 Families First for Children Pathfinder programme. And again, that's one of the two follow documents. And that is again, no, it's not. That's with Janice Altoner, who I think, or is it you again, Paul?
That's with me.
That's you again, Paul. Okay,
that's with me.
Over to you, Paul. Thank you.
Just to give you a little bit of background about the Pathfinder programme and where it's come from. So it came out of 3 reviews that were published back in 2022, the Independent Review for Children's Social Care, the National Review of the Murders of Arthur Labinjo Hughes and Star Hobson, and the Competition and Markets Authority study into children's social care placements. So in February 2023, the government published Stable Homes Built on Love. And this is an implementation strategy backed by government funding that sets out a vision to rebalance children's social care away from costly crisis intervention to a more meaningful, effective early help support. So we are part of that Pathfinder programme. We applied back in November last year to become part of it, to test the reforms, the major reforms that were part of it. So these are very much around our changes to the overarching multi-agency safeguarding approach. So looking at that overarching system level reform, developing family networks and how to improve those family networks, use family networks in a much more tangible way of supporting to keep children in their localities with people that they know, being able to keep them at home and keep them safe, and providing additional support into the families. And there's also a piece of work around family network support packages that I'll come to. And then a new family help service that will provide much earlier intervention, and it kind of brings together our existing family partnership service, so that existing sort of level 2, 3 early help support, which also covers our child in need in section 17, and a new child protection team, which I alluded to earlier, called the MAC PT, the Multi-Agency Child Protection Team. And so these are 4 key parts of the reforms that they are looking at, how we can then deliver them. Now, it's not a pilot, it's a pathfinder. They're not seeking to prove that the reforms work. They believe they work. And so at the moment, what we're hearing from the DfE is that the new government also believe that these are the way forward. And so we're quite pleased with that we're going to be continuing down with these reforms, because sometimes new governments change things. So we're working with key partners. So we're working with the Department for Health, we're working with a delivery partner, and then they're linking into the rest of the civil service on our behalf. But we're also really working very closely to deliver this with our education colleagues, but with our police, Bedfordshire police colleagues, and BLMK, ICB as well, and the other health providers. And we're also looking at how we work closely with our local communities. In fact, Teresa and Salma, who's the Deputy Head of the Family Help Service, were at the Fairness Task Force today to explore how we can work closer with our voluntary sector colleagues to deliver some of the early family support that's required. So really positive things. So the overarching system level reform, so the MASSETs, it's looking at how do we strengthen our education as the 4th safeguarding partner. And our education colleagues came up with a really elegant solution to this, because when it was originally floated with us by the DfE, they were thinking this would be a designated safeguarding officer from education. This would be one individual, but we all know that education is a broad spectrum of delivery, anything from sort of nurseries all the way up to colleges. So Paul and his team came up with a really good solution for identifying a group of individuals from education who could then take on the role and identify who would be the best person to operate as that designated safeguarding officer from an education perspective. And that was one of the key parts of the reforms from them. So it was really positive, and that's now underway, and we're looking at bringing that together. The family networks I mentioned briefly, and that's about strengthening networks with kinship groups. It's about, but it's not just kinship, it's about how do we strengthen the support a family receives from its community. There's that adage of it takes a village. And then they've also brought in something called family network support packages. Now, this is funding that can be used to support the network to ensure that the children are able to stay within the family home. So it might be that support when they to stay with their grandparents. So we had a really good example. This isn't something that's happened here, but in one of the pilot areas where a family network support package, it was identified that mum and dad had left, mum needed additional support, needed time away from the children to receive that support. Instead of the children going into care and into foster care, the team were able to identify a grandparent who lived abroad, were able to support that grandparent to come over, and then lease a car for the grandparent, who then stayed with the family for 3 months. And mum was able to get the support she needed, kids stayed in their own home, went to their school, reduced the level of trauma, and now that family are back together. So there's some real positive ways of changing the way that we think about support and how we can access support. I think that's one of the most exciting parts of this reform. The family help team, that is very much about bringing together, as I've mentioned, that early help offer. And we're going to be looking at a multidisciplinary team that operates in a sort of community locality based way. So you would have alternatively qualified lead family help practitioners. You have qualified family help lead practitioners, so social work qualified, alternatively qualified, but you also have a multi-agency team who you might have someone from who's an IDVA, so a domestic abuse victim support, domestic abuse perpetrator support, drugs and alcohol, probation, housing. The idea is that we do a wraparound offer of support for families. Not quite a one-stop shop, but for families that are known to us, we can then address a team around the family system with them. And within the family help model, we have a way of supporting our external colleagues who could take on that role as well. So it's not always going to be, it doesn't always have to be a local authority family help lead practitioner that is the linchpin for the family. It could also be, it could be a school family worker from one of the primary schools. It could be a health visitor. So there's lots of opportunity, but they will then get, so we're not adding to their workload. What we're doing is we're strengthening the support that they get with the team around the family. So with that, so they're able to do the support for the family, and we're able to support them in a much better way. And then we've got the development of the child protection sort of arena. So at the moment, all of our conferences are chaired by child protection chairs and our independent reviewing officers. We are developing the lead child protection practitioner role, and they will take on that Section 47 assessment, and they'll work with the team manager from Family Help and the social workers from Family Help to look at the needs of that family. With we know that some families will always need Section 47 support, but what we also know is that there's a number of families who then stop very quickly after having gone through Section 47, stop quite quickly, and no further action is required. And so we want to reduce that, and we want to make sure that we're getting all of that information together at an earlier stage, a bit like MASH, and strengthening it. So we're working with our health, police and education colleagues about drafting in additional resources to provide that oversight alongside our lead child protection practitioners who are extremely experienced and qualified social workers. So that's the kind of what we're up to. We've gone live we've chosen our model when we presented it to the DFE was to go live in one neighbourhood and test it, make sure it worked, iron out any kinks before we expand it out across our town. So we've gone live in the north neighbourhood. So we're using the schools-based neighbourhoods because we want our family help teams to be heavily linked to our schools. And so we've gone live in the north. We have our family help team and we have our lead child protection practitioners working out of Limbury Community Centre, but we are operating on the sense of it's support without walls. We want it to be truly neighbourhood and community based. So we don't want people in an office working from an office all the time. We want people out in the community working in the community. So we're looking at how we strengthen that with our partners as well and other touchdown spaces that we can have, and that they can, in a quid pro quo way, they can come and they can drop in and work out of our spaces as well, because we believe that will give us the richness to support families in a much better, we'll get more intelligence and understanding of needs, and we'll be able to support at an earlier stage if we can have those conversations quite quickly. So our initial training has been completed for that team. We've got really good partner discussions which are progressing well. So our education colleagues have worked really hard with us to develop a new job description for this role, because we obviously have a strategic head of safeguarding and education, and we don't want to duplicate. So this is very much more an operational view, and they've been instrumental in developing that job description, and we hope to go out to advert at the end of this month, which is absolutely fantastic. Our health colleagues really got on board very early. They've helped develop, or we helped them, but it was their job description. We've tweaked it, we've developed it. They've gone live, and they're looking again to have someone in post by the end of the month, which is absolutely fantastic. But it's recruitment, so we'll see how that goes in itself. And the police are really challenged with capacity of their resources, but they really see the value in it, and we're working with them to see how do we get them into a position which they can then provide us with the right level of experience that we need for this team. So really, really strong. We've already had some cases come through to our lead child protection practitioners, and we're currently supporting in the family help space in the north 23 children and their families, which is really, really good given we're 2 weeks old. So really pleased with how that's moving along. Family networks, we have a really strong family networks offer in Luton, and at the very initial assessment stage, family networks would be explored with a family. So we're looking at doing an audit with families that have accepted a family network meeting to see how they can get support from their family networks, to those that have chosen not to, and then what are the outcomes. So we're looking at the family networks, we're doing an audit, we're looking at our training. We think is a key aspect of that. And also our first family network support packages have been agreed and provided, which is absolutely fantastic. So they're moving. We just need to firm up our internal processes. So we are moving at pace, and we've also revised our single assessment tool. But happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Just one question for me before I move on to the floor. So regarding the family network support package, flexible funding and so on, are there like qualification criteria for that in terms of what family members can qualify for it, and is it, for example, say means tested for them?
It's not means tested, as far as I'm aware. It's got to be around it's about impact, and will it have the impact of ensuring that those children or that child will be able to remain within their family home. So it might be that they need a little bit of respite, but say they're going to stay with their aunt or uncle, but their aunt or uncle don't have a bed. So we can support the aunt and uncle with purchasing the bed that allows that young person to then have their family, away from their family for a little bit, but they have to be able to stay within their family. Again, we will be looking at, I would be very surprised if people come to us asking for these things if they can afford them themselves. But we will certainly be looking at how they qualify, and we're looking at how we provide Section 17 funding as an example of how that will operate.
If I may,
Councillor,
just to come in as well, there are some criteria that the DFE have themselves set around how we might use the family network support packages. So we have to work through within the confines and parameters of that. But within that itself, as Paul has said, we want to be as flexible as possible and use that as opportunities for our wider networks around children and families to keep them safely with them.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it certainly seems a very positive and good system to try and keep sort of children together within their family or extended family. I mean, the person my question was thinking back, obviously, to a discussion we had about qualifying criteria for other funding, which hasn't been linked to inflation. So that was my reasoning for that. I think Councillor Mahmood, you had your hand up. Yep.
Yep. Wonder how is the reaction, sort of cooperation from the school has been? Is there any, sort of, because initially when you're trying to get them involved, they always tell that we got enough on our own plate without having to take on an extra. So it's not always a huge enthusiasm from the schools, from my experience. So how have they taken it? Are they prepared to work with you and taken on this?
They are, yes, they are. We met with schools on Tuesday, and we've had an ongoing dialogue with them. Just very slowly dripping out what it's going to look like, because obviously it changes things, and it does make some changes for schools, and they will worry about what does that mean for the impact of their families and their pupils. One of the key things I think they really like is we want to link our staff to schools so that there's a dedicated link for each of the teams to each of the schools. So they have a person that they can go and have a conversation with. And the schools, quite a lot of them have said, look, we will find some space in our buildings for you to come in and touch down. We will be more than happy to bring you in. So it's a work in progress as we keep schools going, but they are very enthusiastic for it. They can see the value in it. But we will continue to answer any of their questions and keep them updated. But yes, overall, Councillor, very positive from schools and from health colleagues as well.
The reason I'm saying that because the attendance is a serious concern for most schools, and that would be because all these problems has with the family rather than the child. So
yes.
In that sense, if they can see the benefit of that, they would, that obviously in terms of their attainment as well as their offset is always on their mind.
Absolutely. So what we've done, Councillor, is by attaching it to the school's neighbourhoods, it's meant that we attach an attendance officer to each of the teams. So we have 5 attendance officers that are supporting across the 5 neighbourhoods, and they're attached to all the schools in their neighbourhoods. They're attached to the teams. So it's about joining it all together, and that gives us that whole view of some of the challenges that are existing within, and it means that the attendance officers can get support when they see and recognise that there's a family who needs support. They're already in a position where we can action that.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? No? Yep, go ahead, Councillor Beckham.
Just wondering whether we could have a list of names of schools that perhaps you are thinking of using and touching base with, just so that we as councillors kind of can keep our ears open if there's anywhere we can support or any of that kind of thing.
Yes, I can gather that information for you, Councillor.
Thank you.
That's great. Yeah. So yeah, if you could perhaps share that with all the attendees here for information, that'd be useful. Thank you. So there being no other questions or comments, again, thank you, Paul. We note the content of the report. Thanks for answering our questions. And yeah, we'll move on to the next item of the agenda, which I think is the forward plan.
Thank you, councillors.
Thank you. Trying to get to the right place. So I'm just trying to get to the agenda list. My computer's not playing ball. Okay, so item 11, which is the draft work programme, which is on pages 47 to 61. So the next meeting is on the 24th of October. We do have quite a long list of items on that on for that meeting. Again, perhaps we will have a meeting to discuss. I'm sure some of those reports can be moved back, because that's a lot to get through in one meeting. Certainly I'll be happy to communicate to everyone once we've finalised that. So yeah, that's just kind of for information, really. Any questions or comments on stuff that maybe isn't?
I was just going to make my usual comment of the number of items on there. This took us an hour and a half to do 4 reports. Well, the hell are we going to be here till midnight for 7?
No, absolutely. No, we
Well, exactly. It'd
Yeah,
be double
so-
time, wouldn't it?
yeah. So yeah. Some of these reports we will be moving. We will be moving back. Yeah, it just so happens that there were some reports that have been moved about a bit, and we've ended up with a very full October. We will look at moving some of those, I think. So yeah. Okay, Dheeraj, sorry.
Just to say, Chair, the November meeting has an item that states early help plan. And this was put into the work program for CSRG prior to the Families First update, because Families First effectively will be our early help and child in need work going forward. At the pre-meet, we can furnish you with more details about that, but that's essentially an item that can come off, and that'll give us a little bit more space to move items from next meeting on.
That's great. Thanks, Dheeraj. And I think we've got a meeting in the calendar to discuss this next week. Yeah. So great. Yeah, exactly. So we've got January available where we can move a few things as well. So this is very draft, and it will be updated. Okay. If there are no other questions or comments, we can close the meeting. Thanks everyone for